A woman who finds herself following the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. A woman who walks alone will find herself in a place that no one has ever been. The wise words of Albert Einstein could not ring truer. But really, why do we need to walk alone? To me, that's hard. That's desperate. It's lonely. At the end of the day, walking alone allows us to live a purposeful life. And with purpose being the key to living a peaceful life and having peace in our lives, this is where this story begins. Every family has a culture within the larger context of the community that we belong to. Some are doctors, some are lawyers, artists, musicians, creatives. My family is one of industrialists and chemists. The Chandaria family come from Gujarat in northwest India, and we moved to Kenya 102 years ago. Simple folk from a village called Ravalsar. Today, we reside and own successful businesses all over the world. From the time I was a little girl, I remember my life being consumed with the family business. Everything in it was about the business. My father, for the first 11 years of my life, my father would travel on business in Europe 5 days of the week and only be home for the weekends. I remember social gatherings and family dinners where the men would sit on one side of the room and the women would be in the kitchen. Of course, the men would be discussing the business. Women were not given an equal platform to do this. Unfortunately, the traveling and the stress of the business took its toll on my father's health, and he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at the age of only 30. When I was around 7 years old, and after watching my dad take handfuls of prescribed pills every day, I remember turning to him and saying, "You know, conventional medicine only treats the symptoms. It is actually holistic medicine that treats the cause." The impulse to come up with this statement was very momentary, and it was profound because it was a turning point in my life. The realization at that point that I was different from my family, from my peers. I had always thought differently from everyone around me. Eventually, the business carried on, and as I went through my education, it was non-negotiable and very obvious that I would end up working in the family business, having completed my studies all the way through university. As I realized this, it dawned on me that, is this really what I wanted? In the end, I did go through university, finished my degree, and I really, at that point, had to find the courage to negotiate my first real deal with my father. I wanted to go backpacking in Southeast Asia with 2 of my girlfriends. This was practically unheard of in my family at that time. So I negotiated a deal, and I promised my dad that I would return from my backpacking trip to work in the family business on that first Monday of October 1998. I was very excited. 2 Muslim girls, 1 Gujarati girl, traveling on our own in new countries, new cultures, was a mind-blowing experience. We met amazing people. We traveled all over by boat, by train, by ferry, by car, by tuk-tuk, by taxi. We met incredible people. We visited the oldest rainforest in the world. And it was then that we got a taste of true freedom. I must say, this was my first real taste of being on my own and truly following my heart, fighting the odds and convincing the people in my life why I had to do this. I had, however, made a promise to my father, and so I returned to Kenya to join the family business. I arrived at work very fresh on that Monday morning, and I was ready to prove myself to my family. A year later, my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he had to leave urgently to Canada for treatment. My brother and I found ourselves literally overnight under the guidance of our grandfather, running and being in charge of a multi-million-dollar business. I was 23 years old. I was terrified. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this. But in that moment, any notion that I had of any kind of independence had to be suppressed. And I basically had to impress my family and to prove to them that even under these difficult circumstances, I could handle it, that I would not show any weakness, that I would lock away the fear and the worry of my father dying and show leadership. Luckily, my father beat the cancer. And on his return home, I understood that ultimately that cliché is true. Fortune does favor the brave. Because by this time, I had realized that working in the family business of trading industrial chemicals and food chemicals and manufacturing fast-moving consumer goods was really the furthest thing from my personality and the things that I loved about myself. So when he arrived back home, I remember saying to him, "Dad, it's time for me to get a real job." And he said, "What do you mean a real job? What's wrong with the job that you have right now?" And I said, "No, Dad, a real job. A job that I have earned off my own back. A job that I know what it feels like to sit on the other side of the table. So that when I do start my own businesses, I know what it is to be in employee's shoes, not just an employer." The weight and the burden of my father's disappointment was I could already feel it around me. Yet, he never voiced it to me. All he said to me was, "You go and do whatever it is you feel is right for you, whatever makes you happy." I was overwhelmed with gratitude and joy and this feeling of, wow, he actually understands me. I was so excited, and that validation from my dad was actually what gave me the inspiration to go out there and have the confidence to do what it is that I needed to do. I ended up spending a few months abroad, and eventually I did get my job. I did prove myself, and I basically got the self-worth that I needed to come back to Kenya and start my own businesses. So around the age of 28, I returned to Kenya, and I started a holistic healing center and a media production company, which later went on to launch Kenya's first independent free print magazine called Up Nairobi, Nairobi's Urban Perspective. I was so excited. We were covering stories about investigative journalism, social enterprise, cultural activism. This was never heard of in Nairobi before. And that's when my disruptor truly came out. When we were writing stories about corrective rape, drug and alcohol abuse, environmental degradation, the lack of urban planning in Nairobi, and so much more. But being an entrepreneur is tough. Pursuing what you love and following your heart is not a bed of roses. You will be challenged with legal and financial problems. You will find that people come up to you and steal your ideas, claiming them to be their own. You may even find auctioneers at your door. Trust me, every single day is a challenge. Yet, I knew that I had to do it, and I had to do it on my own. I couldn't go running back to my family and get their support, because I had made that decision to forsake the family business, which meant that I would be always on the outside looking in. But what I remember most from that time is that I would never have been able to go out on my own without my father's blessing. I would never have been able to have the courage to follow my heart and trust myself to start something that was so groundbreaking in Nairobi. There is no guarantee of financial success or financial security when you're an entrepreneur. And yet, only a few of us truly understand what it is to believe in ourselves and to follow our heart, have that courage and find that courage, dig as deep as we possibly can in order to find that place where we can trust ourselves, to truly achieve whatever it is that we set our hearts to do. So when all is said and done, it is never too late to let go and find and do whatever it is that you love. To dare to be different, to dare to be you, your authentic self, and to stay true to you first, to pursue whatever it is that your heart is calling you to do, that is pulling you to do it, regardless of what anyone else may say. And when all is said and done, it is so important that we celebrate each other's differences, that we celebrate each other's weaknesses and eccentricities, because that is what makes us unique. That is what allows us to be unique and part of a far more interesting whole when ultimately you put it all together. Namaste.